The way you treat someone who cannot offer you anything will always reveal who you truly are. A cold October rain drifted across downtown Chicago as evening settled over the city, turning polished sidewalks into mirrors that reflected glowing hotel lights. Luxury cars arrived beneath the grand entrance of the five-star Grand Meridian Hotel, while uniformed valets hurried from one guest to another with practiced smiles. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the spacious marble lobby where fresh white lilies filled the air with a gentle fragrance, and soft piano music echoed through the elegant hall. Every detail had been carefully designed to create an unforgettable first impression. At exactly 8:37 in the evening, the revolving doors opened once more. A woman in her early 40s quietly stepped inside carrying a worn brown suitcase with faded travel stickers and wearing a simple gray coat that had clearly seen many seasons. Her comfortable walking shoes were damp from the rain, and a few loose strands of blonde hair rested against her face after a long day of cancelled flights and delayed connections. She paused just inside the entrance, not because she felt intimidated by the luxurious surroundings, but because she wanted to wipe the rain from her suitcase before rolling it across the polished floor. Her name was Victoria Hayes. To everyone watching from the reception desk, however, she appeared to be nothing more than another tired traveler who had wandered into a place beyond her means. Behind the front desk stood assistant manager Richard Lawson, a man who believed he could recognize important guests before they ever spoke a word. He glanced briefly toward Victoria, then quietly exchanged a look with the receptionist beside him. Neither smiled. Either welcomed her. Richard simply straightened his jacket before whispering, "Please make sure she understands our room rates before she asks." The receptionist gave a slight nod while pretending to organize reservation folders. Victoria calmly approached the counter with a polite smile that had not faded despite the exhausting journey. "Good evening," she said warmly. "I would like to reserve a room for one night if you have availability." The receptionist hesitated for only a second before typing a few keys without genuine interest. The reservation system displayed several available luxury rooms, yet Richard stepped closer before she could answer. "May I ask if you already have a reservation?" he said in a formal tone. Victoria gently shook her head. "No. My travel plans changed unexpectedly this afternoon." Richard folded his hands together. "Unfortunately, we are experiencing exceptionally high demand tonight." Victoria glanced toward a display screen behind the desk advertising premium suites still available for immediate booking. She noticed it without saying anything. "I understand," she replied softly. "If there is any standard room available, I would be grateful." Richard's expression remained professional, yet noticeably distant. "Our remaining accommodations may not be suitable." Before Victoria could respond, another guest wearing an expensive designer coat entered through the revolving doors. Richard's entire demeanor transformed instantly. His smile widened, his posture relaxed, and he personally stepped around the counter to welcome the newcomer by name. Victoria quietly moved aside, patiently waiting while watching the effortless warmth suddenly appear for someone else. Near the concierge desk, a young employee named Emily Parker observed everything with growing discomfort. Emily had worked at the hotel for less than 6 months, but she still believed every guest deserved the same respect regardless of appearance. She filled a small bottle of water from the hospitality station, walked toward Victoria, and offered it with a gentle smile. "You have been traveling for a long time," she said kindly. "Please have some water while you wait." Victoria accepted it with sincere gratitude. "Thank you. That is very thoughtful." Emily smiled before returning to her position, unaware that one quiet act of kindness had just become the most important moment of the entire evening while, across the magnificent lobby, decisions made in silent judgment were already setting in motion consequences that no one inside the Grand Meridian Hotel could possibly imagine. Victoria Hayes remained standing beside the reception desk with quiet patience while the elegant lobby continued welcoming guests whose expensive luggage and designer clothing seemed to earn instant smiles from the hotel staff. Outside, steady rain continued washing across the glass entrance as another luxury sedan stopped beneath the covered driveway. Bell attendants hurried forward with polished umbrellas while the revolving doors turned almost constantly. Inside the Grand Meridian Hotel, every movement appeared perfectly rehearsed, every greeting carefully delivered, yet Victoria could not ignore the contrast between the warmth offered to arriving guests and the uncomfortable silence surrounding her own presence. Richard Lawson returned behind the reception counter after escorting the newly arrived guest toward the executive elevators. His professional smile disappeared almost immediately. Victoria stepped forward once again with calm courtesy. "If there is a cancellation later this evening, I would be happy to wait," she said gently. "I only need a room until tomorrow morning." Richard glanced briefly at the reservation monitor. Several standard rooms remained available, along with multiple premium suites. He already knew the hotel was nowhere near full occupancy, but he had convinced himself that allowing someone who appeared unable to afford the property would somehow diminish the hotel's image. "I appreciate your understanding," he replied in a carefully controlled voice. "However, we prefer to reserve our remaining accommodations for confirmed guests and members of our premium loyalty program." Victoria listened without interrupting. She had spent decades studying hospitality, and she recognized the difference between company policy and personal judgment. "Would you mind recommending another hotel nearby?" she asked kindly. Richard pointed vaguely toward the street outside. "There are several budget hotels within a few blocks." Before Victoria could thank him, another receptionist quietly approached Richard and lowered her voice. "We still have 14 available rooms tonight." Richard answered just loudly enough for his colleague to hear. "Those rooms are being protected for potential late arrivals." The receptionist hesitated before returning silently to her workstation. Emily Parker watched the exchange from the concierge desk with growing concern. She understood she could not overrule management, yet everything she had learned during training emphasized treating every guest with dignity regardless of appearance. Gathering a little courage, she walked toward Richard. "Sir," she said respectfully, "perhaps we could at least help her arrange transportation to another hotel if we cannot accommodate her." Richard looked at Emily with visible irritation. "Please return to your assigned responsibilities." Emily nodded politely, but disappointment settled across her face. Victoria noticed the young employee's sincere concern and offered her a reassuring smile, hoping to spare her further discomfort. "Thank you for your kindness," Victoria said warmly. "You have already helped more than you realize." Emily smiled softly, although she still wished there was something more she could do. Victoria slowly reached into the pocket of her simple gray coat and removed a small leather notebook that looked almost as worn as her suitcase. She calmly wrote several brief observations before closing it again. Richard assumed she was making travel notes, and paid little attention. He never imagined those few handwritten lines would soon become part of an important conversation about the future of the entire hotel. Victoria then lifted her suitcase, thanked the reception staff once more despite everything that had happened, and quietly walked toward the revolving doors. Not a trace of anger appeared on her face. She neither argued nor demanded special treatment. She simply left with the same quiet dignity she had carried into the building. Emily hurried toward the entrance just as Victoria stepped beneath the covered driveway. "Excuse me," Emily called gently. Victoria turned with a calm expression. Emily handed her a folded piece of paper containing the address of a clean family-owned hotel several blocks away. "My grandparents stayed there many times," she said softly. "They always spoke well of the owners." Victoria accepted the note with genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Emily." The young employee looked surprised. She had never introduced herself. Victoria simply smiled. "Your name tag may be small, but kindness is never difficult to notice." Emily watched as Victoria disappeared into the rainy Chicago evening, pulling her old suitcase through shallow reflections of city lights. Inside the Grand Meridian Hotel, the lobby quickly returned to its polished routine, yet unknown to everyone behind the marble reception desk. A brief email would soon be sent from a quiet room in a modest neighborhood hotel confirming that an unannounced service evaluation had officially been completed. The small family-owned hotel where Victoria Hayes spent the night stood only 4 blocks away from the Grand Meridian, yet the difference between the two places could not have been measured by marble floors or crystal chandeliers. A middle-aged couple welcomed her with genuine smiles before offering a clean room, a warm cup of herbal tea, and directions to a nearby diner that remained open late for travelers. The furnishings were modest, the lobby was quiet, and the building lacked every luxury advertised by larger hotels. Even so, Victoria slept peacefully because respect had greeted her before comfort ever could. Shortly after sunrise, soft, golden light entered through the curtains as she sat beside the window with the same worn leather notebook resting on the small wooden desk. She carefully reviewed the observations she had written the previous evening. Every detail appeared in calm, precise handwriting. Arrival experience. Reception greeting. Staff interaction. Policy consistency. Compassion displayed by one junior employee. Visible discrepancy between room availability and guest communication. She paused after reading the final note before opening her laptop. Her email contained only a few sentences. Confidential evaluation completed. Significant concerns regarding leadership culture. Full report attached. Please proceed with the executive review at 9 o'clock as scheduled. She pressed send without hesitation, then quietly closed the computer. There was no satisfaction in her expression. Only disappointment that an opportunity to demonstrate genuine hospitality had been lost. Across downtown Chicago, the Grand Meridian Hotel welcomed another busy morning. Business travelers hurried through the lobby carrying briefcases while conference guests lined up at the reception desk requesting transportation to nearby office towers. Richard Lawson arrived earlier than usual, pleased with the previous evening's occupancy numbers and completely unaware that the most important guest to visit the hotel in years had never checked into a room. During the morning operations meeting, department supervisors reviewed housekeeping schedules, restaurant reservations, and executive arrivals expected later that afternoon. Everything appeared normal until Richard received an unexpected message from corporate headquarters marked urgent. He opened it casually, assuming it contained another routine operational update. Instead, the message requested the immediate attendance of every department manager, assistant manager, and front desk supervisor in the main conference room at exactly 9 o'clock. No explanation accompanied the instruction. Richard frowned slightly before looking toward the general manager. "Have you heard anything about this?" The general manager slowly shook his head. "Nothing. Perhaps another financial review." Around the hotel, quiet speculation spread among employees. Housekeeping supervisors wondered whether a celebrity guest might be arriving. Restaurant staff guessed that investors planned to visit the property. Emily Parker simply continued helping guests with directions, luggage assistance, and local recommendations. Although she remained curious about the unusual meeting, her thoughts kept returning to the traveler from the previous evening. She still wondered whether Victoria had found a comfortable place to stay. At precisely 8:55, black executive vehicles entered the hotel's circular driveway one after another. Valets immediately hurried forward, recognizing license plates reserved for senior corporate leadership. Employees exchanged uncertain glances as several distinguished executives stepped from the vehicles wearing tailored suits and carrying leather portfolios. Among them walked Michael Carter, the respected chairman of the entire hotel group, a man rarely seen at individual properties unless an important strategic decision required his personal attention. His calm expression revealed nothing. He greeted no one beyond a polite nod before walking directly toward the private conference room. Richard felt a sudden wave of nervous anticipation. Whatever the purpose of the meeting might be, it clearly extended far beyond routine business. Moments later, every member of hotel management gathered around the polished conference table, while silence settled over the room. Through the large glass windows they could see the elegant lobby beginning another ordinary day, completely unaware that within minutes the future of the Grand Meridian would change forever. Outside the conference room door, Emily quietly carried a tray of coffee prepared for the executives. As she gently placed the cups inside, she noticed one additional place setting arranged at the head of the table beside Chairman Michael Carter. No name card had been placed there yet. She found that small detail strangely curious. Less than 10 minutes later, footsteps echoed through the quiet hallway. The conference room doors slowly opened once again, and every person inside instinctively turned toward the entrance, never imagining that the familiar traveler they had dismissed the previous evening was now walking calmly toward the empty chair prepared especially for her. Victoria Hayes entered the conference room with the same quiet composure she had carried through the hotel lobby the previous evening. The simple gray coat had been replaced by an elegant navy business suit, and her blonde hair was neatly arranged, yet nothing about her expression suggested triumph or satisfaction. She walked confidently toward the empty chair beside Chairman Michael Carter, while every member of the hotel management team watched in complete silence. Richard Lawson felt the color slowly disappear from his face. It took only a single glance for recognition to settle across the room. The woman he had dismissed less than 12 hours earlier now occupied the seat reserved for one of the highest-ranking executives in the company. Michael Carter stood and welcomed her with sincere respect. "Good morning, Victoria," he said warmly as they shook hands. "Thank you for completing another personal evaluation despite your demanding schedule." Victoria smiled politely before taking her seat. "Good morning, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to stay connected with the experiences our guests encounter every day." Confused whispers quickly faded as everyone realized this was no ordinary meeting. Richard stared at the polished conference table, desperately replaying every conversation from the previous evening, hoping he had somehow misunderstood what had happened. Michael looked around the room before speaking again. "For those who have not yet met her, this is Victoria Hayes, co-founder of Meridian Hospitality Group and the executive responsible for overseeing our guest experience standards nationwide." The words settled over the room with astonishing weight. Several department managers exchanged stunned glances while others lowered their eyes without saying a word. Victoria gently folded her hands together. "Yesterday evening I arrived at this property exactly as thousands of ordinary travelers do every week. My flight had been cancelled because of severe weather. I carried one suitcase, wore practical clothing after a long journey, and requested a room for a single night." No one interrupted. "I intentionally travel without advance notice several times each year," she continued calmly. "The purpose is never to surprise employees. The purpose is to understand whether every guest receives the same dignity regardless of appearance." Michael nodded quietly. A large display screen at the front of the conference room slowly illuminated. Security camera footage from the previous evening appeared on the monitor. The recording showed Victoria entering through the revolving doors while rainwater still glistened on her suitcase. Another camera angle revealed the reception desk. Without commentary or dramatic music, every interaction unfolded exactly as it had happened. Richard's expression remained distant. The receptionist hesitated before answering simple questions. Luxury guests received immediate attention, while Victoria waited patiently without complaint. Nobody inside the room attempted to defend what they were watching because the truth required no explanation. Victoria spoke only after the final recording ended. "This meeting is not about embarrassment," she said gently. "It is about reflection." She looked toward Richard with neither anger nor resentment. "When I asked for a room, several rooms remained available. I was not refused because of occupancy. I was refused because assumptions were made before a conversation had even begun." Richard slowly stood from his chair. "Mrs. Hayes, I sincerely apologize. I exercised poor judgment." Victoria acknowledged his words with a respectful nod. "I believe you regret your decision. My concern extends beyond one evening. Every traveler who enters our hotels carries a story we cannot see. Some celebrate milestones. Others attend funerals. Some begin new careers. Others quietly rebuild their lives after difficult seasons. Hospitality exists because every guest deserves to feel welcome before anything else." Emily Parker remained near the conference room entrance after delivering fresh coffee. She quietly listened while hoping nobody noticed her presence. Victoria suddenly turned toward her with a gentle smile. There was one employee who remembered that principle. Emily looked surprised. She offered nothing extraordinary. A bottle of water. A kind voice. Respect. Yet those simple actions represented the finest service I experienced anywhere yesterday. Michael looked toward Emily with quiet appreciation before returning his attention to the management team. The room remained completely silent as every person slowly recognized that luxury had never been the true product their hotel was meant to provide. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and expensive furnishings could impress visitors for a moment, but genuine hospitality could only be created by people willing to see humanity before status. Outside the conference room, guests continued checking into the Grand Meridian without realizing that inside, the future direction of the entire hotel was about to be decided by lessons that had nothing to do with profits and everything to do with character. Silence lingered inside the conference room long after Victoria Hayes finished speaking. No one searched for excuses. No one attempted to challenge the facts displayed moments earlier on the large screen. Every interaction had been recorded exactly as it happened, leaving no space for misunderstanding. Richard Lawson slowly lowered his eyes toward the conference table, realizing that the greatest mistake of his career had not been breaking a company policy. It had been forgetting the purpose behind the policy itself. Michael Carter allowed several quiet moments to pass before standing once again. He walked toward the display screen and replaced the security footage with another presentation. Across the first slide appeared a single sentence written in simple white letters against a dark background. Luxury begins with dignity. Michael looked around the room before speaking. Most businesses believe they sell products. We happen to sell something much more fragile. We sell trust. Every guest who walks through our doors trusts us with an important moment in their life. Sometimes it is a celebration. Sometimes it is exhaustion after delayed flights. Sometimes it is grief after losing someone they love. We rarely know their story, which is exactly why every guest deserves the same respect before we learn anything else about them. The room remained completely still. Victoria quietly added, "Yesterday evening I was not evaluating room quality, restaurant service, or housekeeping standards. Those measurements can be corrected with training. Character cannot be measured by inspection reports. It only appears when someone believes nobody important is watching." Richard slowly stood again. His voice sounded quieter than before. "Mrs. Hayes, Chairman Carter, I understand that my decisions reflected poor leadership. I accept full responsibility." Victoria looked at him with sincere calm. Taking responsibility is an important first step. Whether lasting change follows depends upon what happens after today. Michael nodded before opening a folder resting on the conference table. Inside were printed reports gathered from previous guest evaluations conducted over the past 18 months. "Unfortunately," he said carefully, "last night was not an isolated incident." He began reviewing documented complaints involving dismissive greetings, assumptions based upon appearance, inconsistent treatment between guests, and repeated concerns about leadership culture inside the Grand Meridian. None of the reports described dramatic confrontations. Instead, they revealed a gradual pattern of small decisions that quietly weakened the company's values. "Culture rarely collapses overnight," Michael continued. "It erodes one conversation at a time." Several department managers exchanged uneasy glances as they recognized situations they had previously ignored because operations still appeared successful on paper. Revenue targets had been exceeded. Customer satisfaction scores remained acceptable. Yet beneath those numbers, something far more important had slowly begun disappearing. Victoria carefully closed her notebook before speaking once more. "Yesterday I met two very different versions of this hotel. One version judged people before speaking to them. The other offered kindness without expecting recognition." She looked gently toward Emily Parker, who remained standing respectfully near the doorway after serving fresh coffee. Emily immediately looked down, surprised to become part of the discussion. Victoria smiled warmly. "A bottle of water cannot solve every problem. Neither can a smile. Yet both communicate something powerful. They tell another human being you matter. Hospitality begins with those moments long before a room key is ever handed across the counter." Emily felt tears quietly gathering in her eyes, embarrassed by the unexpected attention yet deeply grateful that someone had noticed such a simple gesture. Michael closed the folder and folded his hands together. "Leadership carries consequences," he said calmly. When leaders repeatedly tolerate behavior that conflicts with our principles, they eventually become responsible for the culture they create. Richard understood exactly what those words implied. He looked around the conference room at colleagues he had worked beside for years before quietly offering one final apology. I sincerely regret that my decisions influenced others to believe appearances mattered more than people. Victoria acknowledged his honesty with a respectful nod. Regret has value when it becomes the beginning of wisdom. Morning sunlight slowly filled the conference room through the tall glass windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Beyond the glass, guests continued arriving beneath the elegant entrance canopy, completely unaware that the future of the Grand Meridian was being reshaped only a few floors above them. Inside the room, Michael Carter carefully gathered the evaluation reports before announcing that the executive board had reached its final decisions regarding leadership changes. Every person seated around the table instinctively straightened in silence, understanding that the next few minutes would determine not only their careers, but also the future character of one of the most respected hotels in the entire company. Michael Carter slowly rose from his chair and looked around the conference room with the calm expression of someone who understood that difficult decisions should never be delivered with anger. The morning sunlight continued pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished table where every manager now sat in complete silence. Outside, guests walked through the elegant hotel lobby believing it was another ordinary business day, while inside the conference room the future of the Grand Meridian Hotel was quietly being rewritten. Michael placed both hands on the table before speaking. Leadership is never measured by the authority to make decisions, he said in a steady voice. Leadership is measured by the values those decisions create for everyone else. He paused briefly before opening a final folder prepared by the executive board. After reviewing the confidential evaluation completed by Victoria Hayes, together with previous guest reports gathered over the last 18 months, the board has reached a unanimous conclusion. No one moved. Richard Lawson quietly closed his eyes for a moment, as though he already understood what would follow. Michael continued. The current management team failed to protect the culture upon which this company was built. This decision is not based upon one evening. It is based upon a pattern that has gradually replaced hospitality with assumption. His words carried no anger, only certainty. Effective immediately, Richard Lawson is relieved of his responsibilities as assistant manager. Richard slowly nodded without protest. He stood, straightened his jacket, and looked toward Victoria. Mrs. Hayes, I cannot change what happened yesterday. I only hope I remember this lesson for the rest of my career. Victoria met his eyes with genuine compassion. I hope you do. People are capable of becoming far better tomorrow than they were yesterday. That possibility should never be forgotten. Richard offered a quiet thank you before gathering his notebook and leaving the conference room with calm dignity. Several other department supervisors whose repeated leadership failures had contributed to the unhealthy culture received similar notices from Michael Carter. None of the decisions came as public humiliation. Every conversation remained respectful because Victoria had insisted that accountability should never destroy another person's humanity. Once the room became quiet again, Michael looked toward the remaining managers. Some people believe consequences exist to punish mistakes, he said thoughtfully. I believe consequences exist to protect values. When values disappear, no amount of luxury can save a hotel. Victoria gently opened her leather notebook one final time before speaking. Yesterday evening I met one employee whose actions reminded me why this company still deserves hope. She turned toward the conference room door. Emily, would you please come inside? Emily Parker hesitated before quietly entering the room. She looked understandably nervous, uncertain why she had been asked to stand before the chairman and senior executives. Victoria smiled warmly. Emily, yesterday you believed you were offering nothing more than a bottle of water to a tired traveler. Emily lowered her eyes modestly. I only wanted to help. Victoria nodded. Exactly. You did not know who I was. You expected nothing in return. You simply recognized another person who deserved kindness. Michael stepped forward with a gentle smile. Emily Parker, Effective immediately, you will begin participating in our Emerging Hospitality Leaders Program. You will continue your current position while receiving direct mentorship from regional leadership because your instincts reflect the culture we are committed to rebuilding. Emily's eyes widened with disbelief. Sir, I have only worked here for 6 months. Michael smiled. Skills can be taught. Character must already exist. Tears quietly filled Emily's eyes as she thanked both executives. Around the conference table, several remaining managers understood that the promotion had nothing to do with seniority. It was recognition that genuine hospitality begins long before procedures and policies. Victoria slowly stood, preparing to conclude the meeting. She looked once more around the room before speaking softly. Yesterday, many people noticed an old suitcase and a simple coat. Only one person noticed a tired traveler. She paused as her words settled into thoughtful silence. Never forget that every guest who enters this building is carrying something invisible. Some carry joy. Some carry uncertainty. Some carry grief. If we greet each of them with dignity before judgment, this hotel will always deserve the reputation it hopes to earn. No one applauded. No one needed to. The lesson itself filled the room more completely than applause ever could. As Victoria and Michael walked together toward the conference room door, the Grand Meridian Hotel quietly began its first morning under a new standard, one that measured excellence not by marble floors or 5-star ratings, but by the simple willingness to make every stranger feel welcome before asking who they were. The conference room gradually emptied as executives returned to their responsibilities, carrying with them a new understanding of what the Grand Meridian Hotel was expected to represent. Conversations remained unusually quiet throughout the building that morning. Word had already begun spreading that significant leadership changes had taken place, yet very few employees knew the full story behind those decisions. Most simply noticed that Chairman Michael Carter had personally remained on the property instead of departing immediately for the airport, something he rarely did unless rebuilding a culture mattered more than reviewing financial reports. Victoria Hayes stepped out into the hotel lobby once again, this time accompanied by Michael. The elegant marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and polished reception desk looked exactly as they had the previous evening, but the atmosphere already felt different. Employees greeted arriving travelers with greater attention, speaking more slowly, listening more carefully, and making genuine eye contact instead of hurried assumptions. Victoria quietly observed these small changes without interrupting anyone. She understood that lasting transformation would not happen within a single morning, yet every meaningful culture began with small decisions repeated consistently over time. Michael smiled gently. It already feels different. Victoria nodded. People change more quickly when they understand why something matters rather than simply being told what to do. As they continued walking through the lobby, Emily Parker finished assisting an elderly couple with directions to a nearby museum before noticing Victoria approaching. She smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." Victoria returned the smile. "Good morning, Emily. Would you have a few minutes to join me for coffee after your shift?" Emily looked surprised. "Of course. I would be honored." Several hours later, after the busy lunch period ended, the two women sat together inside a quiet neighborhood cafe overlooking a tree-lined Chicago street. The cafe offered nothing extravagant. Wooden tables, soft afternoon sunlight, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee created an atmosphere that invited honest conversation. Emily remained slightly nervous, uncertain why one of the company's founders wished to spend time speaking with someone so new to the organization. Victoria sensed her hesitation and smiled reassuringly. "You are wondering why I asked to meet?" Emily admitted it with a shy laugh. "A little." Victoria stirred her tea slowly before answering. "Yesterday evening you reminded me of someone I met many years ago when I first entered the hospitality industry." Emily listened carefully. She was a housekeeper working in a small roadside motel. One evening she noticed an exhausted family arriving after driving nearly 600 miles. Without anyone asking, she prepared warm cookies for their children because the restaurant had already closed. She expected nothing in return. Years later I asked her why she did it. She answered with one sentence I have never forgotten. She said, "People remember how they were made to feel long after they forget where they slept." Emily smiled softly. "That sounds true." Victoria nodded. "It is the foundation of everything our company hopes to become." She then reached into her leather notebook and removed a neatly folded envelope. "Inside you will find information about our Emerging Hospitality Leaders program. It is not a promotion. It is an opportunity to learn from experienced mentors across the country." Emily accepted the envelope with careful hands. "I do not know if I deserve something like this." Victoria gently shook her head. "Yesterday proved that you already understand the one lesson many experienced managers had forgotten. Skills improve with practice. Character reveals itself naturally." Emily looked down at the envelope for several quiet moments before speaking again. "My parents always told me that everyone deserves kindness because we never know what another person is carrying." Victoria smiled with genuine appreciation. "Your parents gave you remarkable advice." As afternoon sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, both women continued talking about service, leadership, and the quiet influence ordinary people can have simply by choosing compassion over assumption. Across the city, new managers were already beginning orientation at the Grand Meridian Hotel, while Chairman Michael Carter met with department supervisors to introduce a renewed hospitality training program centered entirely upon dignity, respect, and genuine human connection. None of those changes could erase what had happened the previous evening, yet every one of them carried the possibility of preventing the same mistake from ever happening again. Victoria looked through the cafe window toward the busy sidewalk where strangers passed one another without knowing each other's stories. She smiled thoughtfully, believing more than ever that the future of every great hotel would always depend less upon the beauty of its building and far more upon the quiet kindness waiting behind its front door. Several months passed, and the Grand Meridian Hotel gradually became known for something far more valuable than elegant architecture or luxurious accommodations. Guests began mentioning the warmth of the welcome they received long before they described the marble lobby or beautifully appointed rooms. Online reviews increasingly focused upon employees who remembered names, listened patiently, and treated every traveler with equal respect regardless of appearance. The transformation did not happen because new furniture had been purchased or expensive renovations had been completed. It happened because people inside the building had slowly learned that genuine hospitality begins with seeing another human being before seeing anything else. Victoria Hayes returned quietly several times during those months without announcing her visits. Sometimes she arrived carrying a simple backpack after flying on an early morning commercial flight. Other times she appeared wearing casual clothing while stopping for only a cup of coffee in the hotel lounge before continuing to another city. Each visit confirmed the same encouraging pattern. Employees greeted every guest with consistent warmth. Front desk associates patiently answered questions without making assumptions. Bell attendants assisted families with the same enthusiasm they showed business executives. No one realized they were being observed because Victoria no longer came searching for mistakes. She came hoping to witness growth. One crisp spring afternoon she entered the lobby once again, this time wearing a light gray sweater and carrying the familiar worn leather notebook that had accompanied her for years. Emily Parker immediately noticed her while helping an elderly couple complete their check-in. She finished assisting the guests without rushing, personally walked them toward the elevators, and only afterward approached Victoria with a genuine smile. "It is wonderful to see you again," Emily said warmly. Victoria returned the smile. "I wanted to see how our future leader was doing." Emily laughed softly. "I am still learning every day." Victoria nodded with quiet approval. "That is exactly what good leaders continue doing." They walked together through the lobby while observing employees interacting naturally with arriving guests. A young family entered carrying several heavy suitcases and traveling with two energetic children. Before anyone requested assistance, a bell attendant knelt beside the younger child, offered a small coloring book from the welcome desk, and greeted the family with sincere kindness. Nearby, another receptionist patiently helped an elderly traveler understand transportation options without showing the slightest impatience. Victoria quietly watched these moments unfold one after another. None had been rehearsed. None were performed because executives happened to be present. They had become ordinary habits, which made them extraordinary achievements. Later that afternoon, Michael Carter joined Victoria and Emily inside the executive lounge overlooking downtown Chicago. The city skyline shimmered beneath clear blue skies while sunlight reflected across the glass buildings stretching toward the horizon. Michael placed a folder on the table and smiled. Guest satisfaction has reached the highest level in the history of this property. Emily looked pleasantly surprised. Michael continued. Even more encouraging, employee retention has improved significantly. People enjoy working in an environment where respect is expected rather than requested. Victoria slowly closed the folder after reviewing several pages. Numbers matter, she said thoughtfully, but they only confirm what character has already created. Michael agreed. Culture always appears in the results eventually. Emily hesitated before asking a question she had quietly carried for months. Mrs. Hayes, may I ask something personal? Victoria smiled. Of course. Emily looked thoughtfully toward the city skyline before speaking. When you were treated unfairly that evening, did you already know what decisions would be made afterward? Victoria gently shook her head. No. I only knew that whatever happened needed to protect our values rather than satisfy emotions. Emily listened carefully. Victoria continued. If I had wanted revenge, I would have failed the very principles I hope to defend. Accountability should always create opportunities for something better to grow. Those words remained with Emily long after the conversation ended. As evening approached, guests continued arriving beneath the hotel's elegant entrance canopy while employees welcomed them with quiet confidence and genuine warmth. Victoria paused beside the revolving doors before leaving and looked back across the beautiful lobby. She no longer saw marble, chandeliers, or expensive artwork first. She saw people choosing kindness in dozens of ordinary moments that would never appear in advertisements yet would remain forever in the memories of travelers. Walking toward the busy Chicago sidewalk beneath the gentle spring breeze, she realized that the most meaningful transformation inside the Grand Meridian Hotel had never been the replacement of managers or policies. It had been the quiet decision made by ordinary people to treat every stranger with dignity before asking anything in return, and that simple choice had become the strongest foundation any great hotel could ever possess. 5 years quietly passed, carrying the Grand Meridian Hotel into a future that reflected values stronger than any renovation or marketing campaign could ever create. Travelers from across the country continued choosing the hotel not only because of its elegant rooms or convenient downtown location, but because of something far more difficult to describe. Guests often wrote that they felt genuinely welcomed from the moment they entered the lobby. Families remembered patient employees who noticed tired children before parents asked for help. Elderly couples recalled staff members who walked beside them instead of pointing toward elevators. Business travelers spoke about conversations that felt sincere rather than rehearsed. Without realizing it, thousands of visitors had become witnesses to a culture built upon one simple belief that every person deserves dignity before anything else. Emily Parker had gradually become one of the youngest hotel managers in the Meridian Hospitality Group. Her office remained modest despite her new responsibilities. On one shelf rested the same unopened bottle of water that had become a quiet reminder of the evening that changed her life forever. Whenever new employees joined the hotel, she never began orientation by explaining reservation software or operating procedures. Instead, she told them the story of a traveler who arrived carrying an old suitcase after a delayed flight and quietly taught an entire company that appearances reveal almost nothing about another person's worth. She never mentioned names because the lesson mattered more than the individuals involved. One cool autumn afternoon, Victoria Hayes returned once again without announcing her visit. She entered through the familiar revolving doors wearing a comfortable sweater, carrying the same worn leather notebook that had accompanied her on countless journeys over the years. Nothing about her appearance suggested she helped lead one of the country's most respected hospitality companies. She simply looked like another traveler searching for a place to rest after a long day. Before she reached the reception desk, a young front desk associate looked up with a welcoming smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Grand Meridian Hotel. We are happy you are here. How may I help you today? The greeting felt completely natural. No hesitation. No judgment. Only genuine hospitality. Victoria smiled warmly as she watched another employee offer assistance to a family carrying heavy luggage while a concierge patiently helped an elderly guest locate a nearby pharmacy. None of the employees recognized her. None needed to. They had learned to offer every guest the same kindness regardless of who stood before them. Emily soon noticed Victoria from across the lobby and walked over with a broad smile. It is wonderful to see you again. Victoria returned the smile. I wanted to visit without notice one more time. Emily laughed softly. I had a feeling that might happen someday. Together they stood quietly observing the peaceful rhythm of the hotel. Guests arrived, employees welcomed them, conversations unfolded naturally, and dozens of ordinary moments quietly reflected extraordinary values. Victoria gently closed her notebook without writing a single observation. Emily noticed and smiled. Nothing to record today? Victoria looked around the lobby before answering. Sometimes the best report is an empty page. Both women shared a quiet laugh. A few moments later, Michael Carter joined them after returning from another property inspection. He looked around the bustling lobby with quiet satisfaction. Years ago we believed excellence meant beautiful buildings, he said thoughtfully. Now I believe excellence begins the moment one stranger chooses to treat another with respect. Victoria nodded. Buildings create first impressions. People create lasting memories. As evening sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, its golden light reflected across the marble floor much as it had on the rainy night when this journey first began. Yet everything important had changed. Not because someone important had been recognized, but because everyone had learned to recognize the importance within every guest. Victoria slowly walked toward the entrance before pausing one final time. She turned back and watched another traveler enter carrying a weathered suitcase that looked remarkably similar to her own years earlier. Without hesitation, two employees stepped forward with welcoming smiles and kind voices, offering assistance before asking any questions. Victoria quietly smiled to herself and continued toward the busy Chicago sidewalk. She understood that her greatest accomplishment had never been changing policies or replacing managers. It had been helping people remember a truth that had always been waiting beneath the surface. The true measure of hospitality is never found in the beauty of a hotel, the price of a room, or the elegance of a lobby. It is found in the quiet choice to honor the dignity of every person before knowing anything else about them, because the kindest welcome will always leave a longer lasting impression than the grandest building ever could.